I think it goes back to identifying who are you? What is your identity? What is it that you are most passionate about? What is it that you love? And being comfortable showing that, being vulnerable, showing that, recognizing that you are opening yourself up to rejection. But if you experience that rejection, that just means that your values and the way you live your life doesn't align with that community. And you don't
Mhm.
want to be a part of that community anyways. That's like me in that fifth grade table. I don't
Yeah,
want to be a
yeah.
part of that table anyways, right? And so then you move on and it creates a space in your schedule and in your daily, weekly routine to bring in a community or group of people that do better align with who you are as a person.
Hello, and welcome back to the How Are You Really podcast. This is the second part of the 8th episode on Finding Your Tribe, the Power of Belonging. I am your host, Dr. Faryal Mallick. I'm a child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist, and I am very pleased to welcome back Ms. Natalie Rosado to continue discussing the very important topic of belonging. This is an important question. When you are part of a group, now you just mentioned that you have several groups, right, that you're a part of, right? So you have like different communities and different tribes that align with different values, right? How do you keep your individuality while you're in that particular group? Because it
Mm-hmm.
sounds like there's other things besides the church that you value, and that's why you have a
Mm-hmm.
different group of friends or different tribe for that. So how can somebody maintain their individuality?
Oh, that's such a good question. Oh, I love that because as a therapist, actually, I have similar conversations with people, and we may not be talking about a community, but we might be talking about a family, or we might be talking about a marriage where they're trying to figure out how do I embrace this relationship or these relationships while also somehow maintaining some semblance of individuality. And so I think this can span over immediate families, extended families, and then subgroups and communities and on and on. So I actually, if it's okay, I'll talk a little bit about my recent experience.
Mm-hmm.
So I, as you mentioned in our opening, so I initially pursued my passion in sociology, and I've had a passion from very early on racial and ethnic relations, social justice issues, the movements in that area. But I also have always identified as a very religious person. I've always been very involved in my church and in ministries, and for so long, and then there's other parts of me too, right? But for so long, I'll use those two examples. I felt like if I ever was in a room or a setting where there were a bunch of sociologists who had compost in their backyard, and they had a love for environmental issues and were known as tree huggers, that I couldn't talk about my religion or my spiritual beliefs or my relationship with who I identify as my creator openly. I would feel so uncomfortable, and it was my perception that I would be judged or that I would be rejected or that I wouldn't be seen as passionate enough as them. And then I felt like on the other side that if I was in a Bible study or speaking to maybe a pastor, and I was wanting to talk about some of the recent social justice movements, that I would be looked at as if I had two heads. Now, again, this was my individual perception. So not to say that that would have happened at all in those spaces, but so I found myself having to kind of compartmentalize almost like my identity. And that worked for so long until I realized recently, wait, so even if they are accepting me in these circles, they're not fully accepting me in these
Mm-hmm.
circles. So they're just accepting the facet or the side of me that I am showing them, and that it isn't genuine connection to begin with. And
Mm-hmm.
so I started really focusing on this idea of intersectionality and realizing that, wait, there are so many different parts of myself that in some ways might seem like they clash on the surface. Internally, they might sometimes cause a little bit of friction and tension, which I have to, every so often pull back and figure out what my stance is on things. But so once I was able to identify like who I was as an individual and felt comfortable enough presenting myself in totality to these groups of people using wisdom at times, of course, and then I realized that I was able actually to hold on to myself a lot better than if I was more concerned about how I was showing up and how I was being received. And back in the day, when I was more concerned about how I was showing up and how I was being received, that is what I was experiencing was what you were just referring to, which is a loss of myself and almost like this chameleon-like experience with that group for that time being. And it didn't feel great. It didn't feel genuine. It didn't feel authentic. Now, that's a word that gets thrown around nowadays, but it just didn't. I didn't feel like myself. And I wasn't reaping all of the benefits that I could be reaping from those communities. So I think it goes back to, here goes my therapist, wearing the therapist hat. But honestly, I think it goes back to identifying who are you? What is your identity? What is it that you are most passionate about? What is it that you love? And being comfortable showing that, being vulnerable, showing that, recognizing that you are opening yourself up to rejection. But if you experience that rejection, that just means that your values and the way you live your life doesn't align with that community. And you don't want to be a part of that community anyways. That's like me in that fifth grade table. I don't want to be a part of that table anyways, right? And so then you move on and it creates space in your schedule and in your daily, weekly routine to bring in a community or group of people that do better align with who you are as a person.
Yeah. I think that's so beautiful because as you're speaking, I can think about like so many times where I've felt like I am not 100% myself, right? And we started off with that this has come up for me more recently a lot too. That like, where do I belong? Where do I fit, right? Knowing who I am. Now I know myself. But all these, like, even my own family, right? Like this group of friends or that group of friends or, other psychiatrists or other physicians, because a lot of physicians will hang out with each other. Like, I cannot, like, I know who I am, but I don't fit, right? And so it's really hard to still find and build your community, even though I've found my community a few times, but then I've lost it because I've moved and other people have moved, right? So coming into Tampa, I didn't know anyone. It was like, okay, I'm building a new community now. And there's hurdles to that. And I can share after what I did, but what advice do you have for building and nurturing that sense of community?
That's a great question. And I do want to hear how you were able to afterwards. By the way, how long have you been in Tampa? Just curious.
I am going to be coming up to 3 years in end of June. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so still kind of recent.
Yeah.
New. So how to foster that and create that? I think that, so as an individual, then I'll answer it from that stance. Like as an individual, how can I foster that? I think that in order to answer that, I think I would probably have to debunk a myth that's out there. And one of the myths is this idea that a community that will already has to already be in existence, right? In order for me to feel like I can enter into my tribe. The reality is that a lot of times, if you really ask people, if you have a personal relationship with them and you're able to ask them, those individuals that are in your most sacred sphere, how did you meet them? They were really, it seems like by happenstance, I ran into them on a cruise somewhere or a networking event. And it started with just that person and myself. And I just felt like, oh, I finally found someone that like gets me. And chances are that they might have someone who it might be an acquaintance or maybe a friend, possibly a close friend or family member or something, that they feel like they kind of relate to them as well. And so you might then meet that person, and then you have two people that you're now like, I feel safe in this space. So I think sometimes we have these really unrealistic expectations and standards of how things are supposed to go. And I think it's because we look at, I don't know if you do, but I am probably in social media way more than I'd like to admit, but I'll see like pictures or reels or videos of like these events and these gatherings, and it's like, oh, they look so happy and they like look like they've known each other for years. And how did they stumble into that group? The reality is that it's had to start from somewhere. It had to start with one person and another person coming together and feeling like, huh, we have something in common here, and then building off of that. And so I think once we see that way through that lens, it kind of takes the pressure off of us to feel like we have to, in order to be a part of a growing or cultivating group, we have to just stumble into a group that is like already in existence. And I think a way to cultivate that then and to kind of grow that group is to really make that relationship a reciprocal one where you begin to feel, and I wonder if that happened with the story you were sharing with your neighbors, but for a while maybe they were bringing you food and knocking on your door, but and then maybe one day you made something and brought it over and shared it with them. And when people enter into reciprocal relationships like that, where it's like a give and take, and then from that space, there's so much that grows from there. And so that would probably be my recommendation is one, let's debunk the myth that in order to be a part of a thriving community, you have to join one that's already in existence. I mean, sometimes that happens, which is great. Most of the time it doesn't. And a lot of these groups they had to start from somewhere. And I think the second thing to think about is just making sure that when you create those connections or those touch points, that they're very reciprocal in nature. I think that's what helps people open up, be more vulnerable, and want to link arms with you and connect.
Yeah, no, you hit the nail right on the head. So for me, again, here in Tampa, literally the friendship started with online. I had posted that I needed an event catered or something, and that's where this girl messaged me, and she actually made some food for me, and then thereafter we just talked and became friends, and that's how my tribe here, which is very small because of course that couple has other friends, but they weren't my people. So I have like a limited tiny group of people where non-judgmental, and how you were saying that like you couldn't say certain things because you felt like you would be judged. I feel like that's what makes me feel like I belong, because we can say anything to each other and judge each other, but on face, just tell each other that we're judging each other. And that's okay.
I love that.
Open communication there, right? Same thing. I met my husband. I think I'm my most authentic self probably with him, but with his family, even though his family is a different religion than mine, I still feel like I belong. They've welcomed me with open arms, and like I can be myself, and they're just absolutely so supportive and loving, and so that's the tribe that I have, right? So in that sense, like, again, like you said, right, you have to sometimes build the community. I'm also like trying to kind of find my people in like maybe mental health, right, realm. And so I'm putting together networking events, and I'm trying to have open conversations with other therapists and psychiatrists, and welcoming them into my space, into the clinic. And so I think that that's another thing, right? The fact that sometimes you have to actively find your people and your community and build it, right? And so my views or values might not align 100% with all of them, but I'm sure that I will find some people there, and which I have. One of the therapists and I think we, for the first time, had met just briefly, just one-on-one, but now like I feel she's a good friend. Like I can talk to her.
I love that.
And so, it's that, right? You have to sometimes just get out and make your community and make your tribe and be the one that starts it, I guess, and keeps it together.
Yes, because chances are, if you're experiencing something, you know how they say, or they early on, I don't know if you ever grew up hearing this, but I grew up hearing this, especially as an introvert. So, and someone who used to be, I'm still reserved, but I wouldn't ask my questions in the classroom. I would just go home with the questions. And I was told continuously, like, chances are, if you have a question, somebody else has that same question, just ask it. So I think it's in a similar way. It's like if you are needing a community or a place to call home or to feel safe, chances are there are other people that are also looking for that as well. And so if you used the word earlier, it just, I didn't fit in. And so if you find that it's a struggle for you to fit in, then create that space where it fits your needs. And then chances are there are going to be other people that gravitate towards you as well. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's great that you have found, those pockets of people.
Yeah, yeah. And okay, so my next question, like what I said, that I'm trying to build this community. I also offer events and stuff that is open to the general community, not just my patients. And so those are also my way of getting the local community together so they can
Mm-hmm.
come and meet each other, because COVID just made us all scattered and we're
Uh-huh.
all just separated. And so trying to bring them together, right? So trying to create that inclusive space. But that is my next question. How can we create inclusive spaces where everyone can feel they belong? And is that like truly possible, where everyone will feel like they belong?
Yeah. I'll come back to that question. Is it possible to create a space where everybody feels like they belong? Because my answer might be too real of an answer. But I will say this. I think that there are beautiful things that come out of being a part of communities that you
Mhm.
feel very safe in, very welcomed in. But I think your question here is actually referring to what I would say might be one of the downfalls or pitfalls of a community that is made up of people who have a lot in common. And so what ends up happening is that sometimes within our communities, especially if you find yourself just in one community, I think that's why it's important to have what you and I have just personally shared, that there are multiple communities that I'm a part of. There are multiple communities that you now have become a part of in this season. And I think there's a benefit to that, because when we find ourselves just in one or two communities that are made up of people that are very, very, very similar, so there's a lot more similarities than there are differences, we create this like echo chamber almost, right? Of
Mhm.
like the space that we are not opening ourselves up to different viewpoints, perspectives, ideas. And that's where growth, that's where innovation, that's where like renovation, restoration, healing, that's where all of that stuff actually exists. It's like those are the moments that we're stretched, that we're challenged, as opposed to living life with these blinders on. And so, although there are benefits to being a part of communities, I think it's important to be a part of multiple, very diverse communities, because not only are you able to, based off of your values and beliefs and perspectives, challenge someone else on theirs and vice versa, but also, I don't know if you've ever had a moment in a friendship or maybe a familial relationship or even within your marriage. You don't have to say yes if you have, but there's like a disagreement of some sort, and you guys arrive at a place where it's hashed out, no matter how long it takes, you actually are closer. A lot of times people say that they feel closer after that conflict and after resolving that issue than they did even beforehand. And so I think a lot of that happens in more diverse communities where you feel you're pushed a little bit, you're kind of challenged a bit, but there's a lot of growth and closeness that occurs in those spaces. So to answer your question, do I feel like there's a group that is inclusive to everyone? No, I don't think so, not at all. But I think that's what, because of that, I think that's the drive that needs to push us to then be a part of multiple communities that can meet various parts of our needs, our facets, our sides. And that's how we expand our communities. That's how we're able to have those communities connect maybe and grow their groups. And so the answer is no, but I don't think it's a bad thing. I think that's the reason then why otherwise we would just be a part of one community, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So
Have
I
our
think that's
little,
where growth
like, yeah.
happens. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So, it's so, as you were speaking, I was thinking about this, that, that therapist group, that networking event that I started, it's actually open to everyone. It's
Oh,
public events. And the hope was that anyone that's interested in mental health, not just therapists and psychiatrists or whoever, providers, right? Not just providers, but anyone in the community that's open or interested in mental health is welcome to come. And the purpose was, let's start a conversation. We're all human, like let's
mm,
connect, right? but it became to where it's mostly just mental health providers that come. And so it becomes that it was supposed to be inclusive, and it is still, because I still create it as a public event and I invite it's open, it's welcoming, but it has become that. So,
Interesting.
and that's why I asked, right? Like, even if we attempt to create inclusivity and welcoming environment, I wanted to see what your opinion is on if it's truly possible or not, right? Because sometimes it's just not possible. Like, people are too different, or
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yes,
and
yeah,
so.
and the idea hopefully is that with time that people will evolve and grow, and so that's the hope, that in time it would become more inclusive, more diversified. But that's interesting. I wonder if maybe there could be a little bit of reflecting too on maybe your end or whoever's listening, if they've experienced something similar, and just wondering, are there any things that we did do or didn't do that maybe kind of like led our group into a more kind of cohesive unit almost? Or another question might be, is there anything that we can do or offer that would kind of reopen that to maybe a workshop where you have a panel of those that have struggled with mental health and those that treat mental health, and kind of bring in both. But I think that just speaks to the constant ebb and flow of just life, of communities and groups, and then us as individuals. Our needs are different, our desires change, our interests change. And so I think even when somebody does find a community or does find a group or has established one, you're still like, even yourself, right? You've established one, but you're still thinking, in what ways can I open this up a little bit more? Or maybe reflect on what we have done, and I might want to change things. And that's just a reflection of how life works. Everything is in constant change, constant evolution.
Absolutely. And also, I guess we've established that it's not just finding your tribe, but it's maybe finding your tribes
Yeah.
nest, right?
I love that. Yes.
Yeah, and that's great, because then you have all your values or interests can align with different communities or different groups, and that satisfies that part of your individual, being.
Yes.
I do want to switch focus over to the societal part of it, right? I know you said it's two parts, individual and societal. So how does belonging play a role in addressing large societal issues? And how can society help with, I guess, that sense of belonging for the individuals?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll put my sociologist hat on for this one. Actually, I have a question before I start. Have you ever watched the show Big Brother or any of their like renditions? Like,
I
I
have
know they have
not.
Celebrity Big Brother. No? Okay. So for those listening, if there are Big Brothers fans, I'm going to use that as an example. I think it's a great one. So I'm a huge fan of the show. And for those that may not necessarily know too much about it, they stick, I don't know, let's say, I should know this. I think it's like 16 people, let's say, in a house. And everybody starts off in what appears to be at the same baseline. So they don't know anything about each other, unless except whatever they decide to share. They don't bring their work titles with them, their bank accounts with them. They don't bring family members with them or marital status, and no technology, no social media, nothing. They literally started a baseline. And what I find to be so intriguing, as I guess a sociologist, when I watch this show, I just eat it up, is that instantly, probably within maybe 1 to 2 episodes, there's a hierarchy that has been created. And there are a number of people that feel like they're on the outskirts of the in group, and then there's the in group, and then there's the leader of the in group. And you'd be surprised what they use actually in order to create this hierarchy and decide who is placed where. I love it. It happens quickly. And even though this show or CBS has attempted to It's almost like they've wanted to place these people in this very like clean laboratory where there's no impact whatsoever from the outside world. But it just shows you as human beings that we figure out innately who we connect with, who we will see and view as an outsider, who is too different from us, and so we don't want to be associated with them. How we choose a leader for our group. So I say all of that to say that I love how we talked about individuals, and then we talked about a little bit about families and friendship circles and communities. But when we look at it on a larger macro scale, when we look at our society, there are a lot of these moving parts that are happening around us all the time. Mm-hmm. And there are different things that we use to assess where we kind of fit in this larger society. And so some of those things might be race, ethnicity in some cultures. Some of it might be tradition, socioeconomic statuses, other demographic markers, right? Those things, we're constantly being bombarded with that, and we're experiencing that. And then, so we have this outside world, we have our perceptions of like what that means to us. And then we have other people's perceptions of what that means to them. And naturally then what happens is we find ourselves attracted to people that are similar to us. And then some of us might be a little bit hesitant to maybe connect with people that are too different from us. But if you're a little different, that's okay. And we are just intrigued, right? So there's all these different pieces that are moving around. And so when I think about the sense of belonging, I think that it helps us feel like we're not alone. We're not this lone wolf, as this larger thing is happening in our macro worlds and society. I think it gives us an opportunity to also cope better and better handle and deal with those challenges that happen on a macro level that we feel like are out of our control. We may not necessarily agree with because it doesn't align with our values and with our beliefs and our morals. And so in order to not feel lonely or to feel like we are just on this island by ourselves, we find ourselves desiring to be with people that just might understand us a little bit better or might understand some of our challenges and our struggles. I think that's where the sense of belonging really comes into play when we think about a larger society overall.
Yeah. So it's so interesting. I haven't seen this show, but
so good.
I know, but I'm part of group relations conferences. I don't know if you've ever heard of them, but that's exactly that concept. Like they get people together that don't know each other and put them in a spiral circle. Sometimes they're weekend long, sometimes they're 5-day residential ones where you're literally staying in like a dorm with those people too. And so it's that, like, imagine just over a weekend, like you're spending all day in different groups with those same people, and how quickly that organization forms, and then there's a breakdown of the organization while you're still there. And so it's really interesting concept, and I think we might have to do that later since you're a sociologist. That's going to be a different episode. That'll be fun to do together.
I would love it. Oh, just hearing it just gets me super excited.
Hello, this podcast is being sponsored by FMP Mental Health Spa and Family Psychiatry. If you need help, please reach out to us via our website or email or call us. We are available in Tampa, Florida in person, as well as via telepsychiatry in the states of Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, Virginia, and now Pennsylvania as well. How has like finding your tribe or your tribes impacted your personal and your professional life?
Oh gosh, drastically. Absolutely. And I'll share why. So, as I mentioned, I kind of went through this, which I wouldn't change it for the world, but I've had some challenges along the way, but where I've really gone from feeling like I didn't fit in or didn't belong and trying to fit. It's like fitting a square peg into a round hole, and then experiencing the challenges of that. And then coming out on the other side and realizing, wait a minute, as a square peg, I could absolutely find my square holes. and so it's been a great journey, because then I've been able to recognize what it feels like to be on the side of not feeling like you belong, and not wanting to do the best I can to ensure that people around me don't have to feel that if I can do anything about that. So I would say the one place that I have really benefited from this concept has been professionally. I don't know if you started out this way, but I know for for me as a therapist. I didn't take any business classes in school. We didn't learn anything about owning a business. I just really entered in because I just wanted to help people. It was really my thing. And I still do. I just never thought that it would look the way that it looks now. And it's been a beautiful journey, but there have also been some struggles that have come along with that because as I became a solopreneur and then opened up a group practice, along the way, I feel like the pool of people who could relate to me changed. And I think that was okay, that it needed to change. But there was a season there for a bit where I felt like, okay, so I can't really speak to my family members about this because they don't really know too much about owning a business, you know. But then I couldn't speak to some of my friends who worked for corporate America and didn't really understand some of the challenges that I was experiencing as an entrepreneur. And then sometimes I even felt like with my male counterparts, they wouldn't understand some experiences that I had as a female entrepreneur that was trying to, and a minority female entrepreneur at that was really trying to kind of build something from the ground up. And so as I kind of experienced various levels of my career and my professional work, I felt that I needed to seek that out. And I think that's another myth that maybe we might want to touch upon is that I know some people might feel like nobody wants to be around me, but how often are you going out and trying to be around people? You know, it kind of works both ways. And I felt like I don't have any female entrepreneurs knocking on my door right now. I think I need to go out and find them. And so I did. And that was the one, if I had to pick a part in my life where I feel like I benefited most from a community, it has been that. It has been such a blessing to be able to talk honestly and openly about some struggles, whether related to finance or leadership or running a team. I mean, those are things that I felt like I needed to speak to someone who kind of knew what I was experiencing, even if they didn't have the answers, just to know that they've been in my shoes or in my shoes was comforting enough. And so I would probably say that that has been the one area that I'm so grateful that I've either attended certain networking events or met with a fellow business owner for coffee. I'm thinking of one in particular now that's a really close friend of mine. And so I think those small moments have really made such a large impact in my life.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yes.
I do want to get into the myth.
Sure.
So tell me more about that.
Yeah, I think that I use the word myths. It's funny. Sometimes I'll talk about that in my world, in my circle, mental health myths and debunking mental health myths. But I think the reality is they're just misconceptions that people have, and they believe them with like good intent. We can't help what we've been exposed to. We can't help what the environment that we grew up in or some of the experiences that we've been faced with, and all of that we bring with us in some way, shape, or form, and that shapes the way that we see ourselves, see others, and see the larger world. And so that's where we lightly use the word myths, but really what's happening there is that there are things that people, I think, with good intentions believe to be true because that's what they were taught, or that's what they saw maybe at one point in time, or that's what they're hoping for. So, they're hoping that that's the way that it works. But the reality is that there are a few misconceptions that people have when it comes to community. So I think we've already kind of touched upon some of them. One of them is that a community has to be in existence already in order for you to just kind of go right on in, and it's already set up for you. They have a seat waiting for you at the table, and they can't wait for you to join the next meeting, right? And that's not the way it always is. I mean, sometimes you're the one that's pulling a person in to chat with them and say, hey, I have an idea. What do you think about joining me on this journey and starting this community? So I think that is one of the myths that sometimes we carry when it comes to community. I think the other one too, we touched a little bit upon when we were talking about your neighbor, that community doesn't always come in the form that we think it's going to come in. And I think that could actually speak to a lot of different people and people in different seasons. I'll give an example. Sometimes I'm asked, who is your biggest mentor growing up? Now, here's the thing. I had a lot of great experiences with a lot of different women in my lives, and men as well over the years. But there was this one woman who still is in my life today. She was an undergraduate professor of mine. So you have to think about this. Here I am, 17, 18, 19 in undergrad. I am a first generation a college graduate in my family. And here's this Latina that I have no understanding of really anything related to college courses and finances and any of that stuff. I mean, I was good at academics. That's all I had going for me, right? And so, and then here she was. I won't try to guess her age, but she was definitely, older than me, and this Caucasian woman who had a very, very different experience than I did. And I would have never thought that she would have been my biggest supporter, my biggest cheerleader until this day, a person that I really look up to. So it didn't come, and she helped facilitate my community in undergrad. And so she got me really involved in West Tampa. I was doing some projects for her there, and I got to meet a number of other professors that were working in our sociology department, and I got to work on a few projects because she allowed me to and kind of brought me in. So my way into this college community was not at all the way that I thought it would come. And so I say all of that to say that sometimes, we might close ourselves off to opportunities and experiences because we don't think that it's coming in the box that it should be coming in. And so I just say you have to be open to all opportunities and possibilities as they come your way. You never know what's going to be your breakthrough into a community that really changes your life.
Yeah. Okay. So can you share a story where you feel like belonging, significantly changed someone else's life? Like where they've shared with you, or maybe a client, or, somebody that you can like kind of talk to?
Yes. Yeah. There's, so I used to work, I won't share too many details just because of the nature of our relationship, but I used to work at this, pregnancy center in the Tampa Bay area. And women would go there if they found themselves with an unexpected pregnancy, and they just really needed help navigating their options and deciding what to do with that pregnancy. And there was a young girl that came, and we had a very, very open conversation about where she was in life and what her current circumstances were. And maybe for the first time, she possibly felt seen or heard or just really kind of like embraced. But after that, I went on this journey with her where she joined a few groups that I was running. She volunteered at the center, and she now actually has become a mental health counselor herself. But it just shows the impact that one person can have on someone's life. Yeah. But then when you open up space for them to sit at the table, you never know the changes and the ripple effect that it could have on their lives and the lives of people around them. And now she's a mom. And so I love to think that those moments really created a legacy of change for that family.
Yeah, that's such a good story. Thank you for sharing it.
Of course.
Okay, hello everyone. I just wanted to stop by and ask you, how are you really doing? Also, how are we doing? Are you guys enjoying this topic? Please leave us comments about it. And also, if you have any pressing questions, please go ahead and leave those in the comments too. We will find an expert to come and speak about it. Finally, please subscribe to the channel, like our videos, share it with your friends, and follow us on Instagram. So, a fun question. Is there something surprising you learned about yourself while you were on your journey of the sense of belonging?
Yeah, oh, that's a really good question. Actually, yeah, so I'll share this story. So this was in grad school. So this was in my master's program, and there was a class that we had to take that was called group theory. And essentially we were just sitting in group therapy every week, and one of us would facilitate the group therapy session. It was just our way of learning how to facilitate groups, really. And so it was us, the students, and then of course the professor was there. And so this was probably like 3, 4, 5 weeks into the semester, and it was a fairly average size cohort. So we all kind of knew each other. We definitely knew of each other. So we had pretty good relationships with each other. And so that day I was sitting in class, and there was one student. It was her turn to run the group, the therapy group. And we would actually talk about real life issues, believe it or not. So that was one of the benefits of going to, a counseling grad program, is that you get free therapy. So yeah, free counseling. So we were sitting there, and so the group facilitator that day, she asked the student next to me to share about this one traumatic experience that she had had, and that student actually had previously said that she was open to sharing, so it wasn't like she was put on the spot or anything like that. But the student kind of turned around and said, "You know what? I would love to share, but I don't feel comfortable sharing." And the group facilitator asked why, naturally, and the student turned to me and said, because not everyone, including Natalie, has opened up about anything with us in the group. And I remember that moment thinking, well, what does that have to do with you share? If I've decided not to share, or I haven't really thought of anything that is worth sharing, what does that have to do with you sharing? And so I didn't say anything that day. I kind of stayed with it, sat with it, I spoke to my professor. And after a while, I realized that true vulnerability is fostered with true vulnerability. And in that moment, she felt like because I had not been open about anything, then she felt like I couldn't be trusted with her openness. Mm-hmm. And I will have to say that I have taken that lesson with me since then and have applied it to various parts of my life, professionally and personally. And when there are times where I want to get closer to someone or I want to create a deeper connection, I'm reminded of that moment. And I do my best to try to be open and to share and to foster that connection rather than expecting that connection from the other person. And so I would probably say that's been my biggest life lesson, is that sometimes we want to not run the risk of opening up and then a person not reciprocating that. Everybody's feeling that way, so why not be the one to kind of start that domino process? And so that was probably my best experience with that.
Yeah, that's great that you learned that and that you're applying it, because I feel like for me, especially on a professional level, that's also, I feel like, important because, a lot of the times if, patients don't feel comfortable to be vulnerable, they're not going to be. And of course, keeping the boundaries, but still you might have to show some vulnerability for them to be able to open up with theirs. And so I think I think that's so important. Okay, so if you could give your younger self a piece of advice about belonging, so that when you were in 5th grade, what would it be?
Yeah, it would probably be for me to be more comfortable with who I am. Mm-hmm. And that might not be as universal of a statement as I might think it is, but at least that spoke to my experience. Mm-hmm. I think if I had been more comfortable with the more reserved, introverted, shy 5th grader that I was, that just loved having my head in books, I don't think I would have put myself in those positions to be rejected by people that I didn't really want to be friends with in the end. And so it would probably be that, just to learn to be more comfortable with myself a lot sooner.
Yeah. And hopefully some youngos, kiddos are listening, watching, or their parents are, so they can help them. Because this is the thing, right? I've actually seen this pattern with my middle school kids that are transitioning into high school, or high school kids that are transitioning into college, that they just start feeling like they just don't belong with the friends maybe that they had for years, Mm-hmm. And so, and I think that's such good advice for them. So, All right. So last one, how are you really doing?
Yes, I love that. You know what? I'm doing really well. I am. I'm doing really well today. And had you asked me that question maybe a few days ago, I don't think my answer would have been the same. But I just want to share that with my answer that I'm doing well today, I want to highlight that with life, things are constantly changing, and you might not be doing well today, but you might be doing better tomorrow. And that's why it's so important to not define your life based on one chapter, to not make really big decisions in a very small, emotional, temporary moment. It's like nothing stays the same. And so I take good days when they come, and I handle not so good days when they also come.
Yeah, that's such a good answer. Thank you. Thank you for being vulnerable today. Thank you for taking out the time to talk about this topic. I found it very insightful. This was such a great,
That was great. Thank you. Thank you.
conversation.
Thank you for creating the space. I think it means a
Yeah.
lot. And I think we talked about something that will resonate with a lot of people, hopefully.
Yeah, I really hope so. I'm just so grateful for you coming today, and taking out the time, and just thank you so much. And I also want to thank the audience for tuning in. If you guys have any pressing topics that you'd like to hear about, leave them in the comments so we can have expert speakers come and speak about them. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Until next time, bye.